Hey, everybody, welcome to Musings of a COVID-19 Youth Pastor. I am on camera here with my friend Bonnie. Bonnie, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hi, Ryan. I am a family therapist working out of Cornerstone Vision Counseling. I taught school for a long time, was a teacher for until I took an early retirement and then did this. And I've been a therapist now for about 20 years. I work with kids, teens, families. That's my focus.
Awesome. So, Bonnie, tell me what subject did you teach and what age group?
I taught math and science originally with middle high kids and high school, taught physics, chemistry. And then last 15 years of, I shouldn't say how long, but last years of my teaching was with gifted kids in a unique setting where they could come and be with us in a classroom, just them, and we were able to do some amazing things. And just because kids are very bright or very talented in something doesn't mean they're necessarily fantastic A+ students. It just means that they have a God-given ability to think through things, to process things, to create things, to experience things that more so than other people do.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, Bonnie, I wanted to talk. So my family, but I think a lot of our families in general have been kind of thrown a pretty big loop with issues concerning COVID-19. So I want to get into it and kind of ask some questions. So the first one I have is for my high school seniors. One of the things that a lot of teens are going through, and I would say all teens are going through it, but it's especially pronounced in our seniors, is they've lost maybe prom. They've lost all the things they were looking forward to their senior year. Some of them, there's not even going to be a graduation ceremony now. How would you suggest they deal with those feelings almost of loss, I would say? What's the best way for them to process through those?
Absolutely. First of all, it's important for everyone, teens in particular too, to realize that we are all grieving a lot right now. Everyone in their family, all of their friends, we're all grieving, first of all, that this thing has invaded our country and our homes. We're grieving that we don't get to connect with one another. We grieve we don't get to hug. We grieve that we aren't for teens or kids, we're not in school. They are social beings and they're not able to do that. So it's understanding that we're all grieving and their sadness is a part of that grief. So if they see it, so it's not, yes, they may be depressed, but they're not depressed in a way that's not workable. So when we're grieving, we go through about 5 different stages. And the first one is denial. We can't believe this has happened. The second is anger. We're really angry about it. Then the next is what if, the bargaining, we keep, what if this had happened? What if that had happened? Could we still be together? Then there's sadness, depression, and then there's sort of acceptance. And we go through all 5 of those steps, forward, backward, in between, and so on and so forth, the whole time. We're grieving the losses that we have, everything that we are losing, we're grieving. So it kind of piles on top. And when you consider that there are incredible opportunities that teens could be having, like you said, especially high school seniors, this was going to be the greatest thing they could have. And they know that they'll not see maybe some friends until in the summer, and there'll be other people they can't see. So recognizing that it's part of grieving is why they feel so badly and why they feel so sad can be helpful. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with them or they can't figure it out. That's just that's the process, how our minds and our hearts work.
Yeah.
What they can do about that is possibly look into some creative ways to celebrate that. They need to select things to do, like music is typically a favorite for teens. And that's sort of, it isn't not an escape. In this case, in this timing, it is a matter of something to do that takes them away from what they're missing.
Sure.
Another thing could be connecting with one another, with friends on video, all the different social media ways that they do it. Another thing is to spend some time with their family. Even if they don't really want to spend time because they need at least that social connection. Play games, do a puzzle, watch the same movie, something where every day they spend a little time with family. That's just incredibly important for everyone.
Sure. So even if you don't like your family, you should spend some time with them.
That's exactly true. And
Okay.
to be honest, teenagers are pretty much, and especially high school seniors, they're focused on themselves. They're on there because they're ready to branch out into the world, and they've got a lot of pressure on themselves. So that's what they're focused and thinking about. They're not really thinking about their family. Not that they don't care about their family, they just don't want them around right now.
Sure.
So it's really important to not add to the social isolation by also isolating themselves from their family. So
Sure.
they have to figure out how to get along with them.
Sure. So let me go back to the stages of grief. I think did you give us 5 stages of grief? I believe it was anger, bargaining, Netflix. Was Netflix one of those stages?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So when we talk about the stages of grief, I guess speak to it as me as an individual, but also if I'm a parent of a teen, I think for me as a parent, my kids are kind of not experiencing this as anything more than an early summer break with some homework, because I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. They're not aware of any loss
Right.
whatsoever. They just want food and to get their homework done and to get playtime with dad. So I'll ask some questions for our families with younger students, but for my teen, I guess when it comes to the cycle of grief, is there a tension or is it just one or the other? When it comes to going through those stages of grief, is it that whether it's myself or my teen, do I just ride the waves and let them take me where they go? Or, if I'm a parent, the question parents would ask me would probably be like, okay, how can I just kick my teen in the butt and get them to acceptance as quick as possible? Because that's the one that makes my life easier. Yeah, I think if they were to be honest with me, and that's what I feel sometimes for our teens. When I see them going through those stages, I'm like, okay, how much of this do I dwell in with them and celebrate? But how much of this do I help them move on to the next stage? So can you speak to that?
Well, it's kind of complicated because those stages, sometimes the anger that we feel because we can't hang out with our friends comes out in something else we might not normally get angry about, we get really angry about. And so a teen might mom might say, okay, after dinner, want you to put the dishes away. Normally that would be not wanting to do it, but they might grumble, but they would do it. But because of grieving that they are doing, that teen might just lash out at mom. And so for parents, it's to understand that as parents, you're grieving, your teens are grieving, and so you're going to connect with each other, sometimes take out that grief on somebody else in ways that you wouldn't normally do if you weren't in this process of grief. And I think that that's important. And parents too, when you are really angry with your kids, it may not be that the kids are so much worse than they ever are. It's just that you're grieving, that you're also at home all the time and not with your hanging out with your friends, especially if you're working from home and you're trying to focus and the kids are there and they want to play. So so everybody's going to take out feelings on somebody or something else that isn't typical.
Yeah.
So accepting that, allowing that. Now, it doesn't mean if you kick something, and kick a chair and break it or something, doesn't mean you don't repair the chair. Or if you hurt somebody, doesn't mean you don't go back when you've calmed down and say, I'm sorry, that was out of line. That's not an excuse, but I didn't mean what I just said. So there's a lot of grace, a lot of forgiveness in this whole time, both teen and parent.
Yep. So
Is that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've been, and as probably as much as a lot of families, I've been living there. So, my situation is, and I think a lot of our families might have some similarity to this, maybe not completely identify, but, I think for us in the home, when this whole thing first started, I had these images in my head of, oh, we're not going to have anything to do. We're going to be sitting around and playing board games and watching Netflix, and it's going to be sunny. I'm basically getting a month-long spring break with my kids. But what I've noticed is you come home, you have the added stress of e-learning, the added stress of e-work, and everybody's trying to figure out new things. Me and my wife both work full-time jobs, which a lot of our parents at Grace Point, that's where they're at. And then on top of that, we have a 1,000-square-foot home. Now, some families have a much larger than that, but we're kind of in close quarters all the time. And so even doing this conversation with a 5-year-old not like on my head is some kind of weird human hat is difficult. So tell us, you've kind of spoken to that, but how do we deal with the added stress in the home when it is there? Because I mean, I've had some of those good times, but how do we deal with those? And maybe even what's like what's the escape lever? I mean, does that make sense? Like when I'm really stressed, do I just send the kids out to play outside? Here's a roll of duct tape and some thumbtacks, or what would you what would you suggest?
Right. Well, yes, there definitely has to be some separation sometimes. We need to move away. One thing that's really, really important, and this is really hard for teens and hard for parents to get teens to do, but is to have some structure in the day and not stay up all night until 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning so that you're exhausted and tired when your parents want you to do something, or you have to do your e-learning, or if you're a senior, you've got to finish this coursework, and you stayed up talking to friends through social media until way into the night. Create a structure. The teen doesn't have to go to bed maybe until midnight, but they need to get their 8 or 9 hours and get up then and have a structure. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to do this from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11. It just is like in the mornings. The mornings are when I'm going to do my e-learning or my e-work or whatever. And we'll have lunch together, or maybe we don't have lunch together, but we do something fun in the afternoon. You break it up, and if possible, now you guys, like you said, you and your wife are working, so you get home, but one of you's been with them during the day, or are they other places?
Sure. Oh, yeah. So in our situation, somebody's been with them. Yeah, we essentially got exposed to COVID-19, and so we're all okay now, but we're trying to isolate as much as possible.
Right. So one of you is with them. So whichever parent is home continues with that structure, so that when the other one gets home, there's not the e-learning sitting on top of that, because that's just exhausting anyway. And because they aren't seeing their friends either. They might be having fun, but after a while, even dad gets boring,
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. No, I think it's a incredibly good idea to have a family schedule. I'll probably talk about this in one of my future devotionals, but one of the things I love about the book of Daniel is one of the times Daniel gives has one of his visions, his experiences with God. It starts with saying, at the time of the daily sacrifice, which seems like a throwaway line, but there was actually no daily sacrifice. Daniel was making a schedule for himself based upon the rhythms of faith that he grew up with. And so I love the value of intentionally adding a schedule to our day to kind of know when we can release that stress. And so it's totally okay. You think that families need to spend some time in their rooms reading and just relaxing on their own, taking some of that individual time. Okay. Awesome.
Absolutely. It's also, can I add one more thing?
Oh yeah, please do.
Okay. It's also important as parents are, their faith isn't being necessary. I'd say our faith is being challenged during this time. So it's also really important to include a connection with Jesus in this time with the family on a daily basis. It doesn't mean you have to sit down, have daily devotions, but maybe just talk about things with kids, or with what was it like then or what has it been like in other pandemic or crisis situations where people had to do this? What do you think it was like in the 1800s when, there were diseases that swept across and killed everybody? So talk about that, and how did God work through that, or how do they think God will help them through all of this? And it's not talking about blind trust. It's talking about how God is obvious and where to see him. In part of the day, maybe it doesn't have to be every single day, but I think every day, a portion of that schedule is think about what you could do for somebody else that has it worse than you do. What is there, and you might not be able to actually do it because of the restraints of social distancing, but something outside of themselves. Because when we focus on everything on ourselves, then we lose what Christ told us to do and to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that I don't remember where I heard it, but one of the historical things that you hear a lot is that during the times of the plague, when everyone else was running away from the city, it was known that the Christians were always the one running towards the city where the needs were. And right. So, I would definitely always suggest to people to obey the civil laws. However, make sure we know what those civil laws are, because there's still a lot of room within those to help people. So, for example, last night I was actually reading, and anybody listening, I wouldn't take this as a legal opinion, check it yourself. But from what I read, if you are going to the grocery store to get food for your elderly neighbor, absolutely leave it on their porch, walk away. All of us have someone we could check on to make sure they're doing good. Maybe for those who are economically depressed, even just sending them money through Venmo. There's somebody that's on my heart to send money to today that I know they're probably in need because they're going to lose a lot of business. They're a small business worker, and I don't even know that they're going to get to keep their job. And so just reaching out to people like that, I think I tend to find that I'm more healthy when I'm helping other people.
Absolutely.
Me move through those stages. But yeah, absolutely. That's a great advice. So
they can also, one more thing on that, they can send, I know one thing I saw, I think the governor may have suggested, send letters, cards to people that are in nursing homes or in facilities that can't see anybody except the people that work there. We can always make a card. There are just things that we can do to help somebody else, even if we don't know them.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I would say even too, if places have technological capabilities of iPads, even talk to somebody face to face, whether it's a grandparent or just somebody And so I think there's a lot of options out there. So let me transition now to let me ask one more question about teens. So with teenagers, I think the temptation is, so I've had to learn how to do my job on the digital world, and I'm still in that process. I'm a pretty techie guy, and it's been a little bit of a challenge to me. But for our teens who have basically are fluent in the digital world, is there a point at which, so like I had one family joke with me that like when the governor said no doing anything, that teen was like, I'm good. I'm going to my room for 3 weeks, mom and dad. I'm going to be playing video games. Just throw a few chicken nuggets every hour underneath the door. I'm good to go. Shut their door. And, the parents were joking with me like the Lord has prepared him his whole life for social distancing because we can't get him to come out of his room. Now there's actually laws in place to keep him there. So I guess, is there a point at which too much digital, we need to be wary of that, either for our physical health or our spiritual health?
Absolutely. There is a point at which, no one should be overwatching the news, because the purpose of the news is supposed to be factual, but often there's that sensationalism to it, and we hear it. And again, it may not always be accurate. They're just trying to report what they've heard, what they've seen. So if we spend too much time, we will find ourselves in a state of anxiety all of the time. So that's important to not overdo that. The same with video games and anything. Too much screen time is not healthy. You've got to get up, go outside, take a walk, do yoga, do something. And teens aren't typically, unless they're athletic, but many teens are not inclined to get up and move if they don't have to, if they can,
Sure.
sit at the computer. But they're
37-year-old youth pastors fall into that trap too. I'm just going to be honest.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And emotionally, yes, spiritually, um, it definitely has an effect if we're not thinking about at all, if we don't spend any time, and I'm not saying we need to do it 24/7, but if we don't take time to think about and talk about what, even with our friends, what it's like as a Christian to be in this setting, and how do we respond? What if we have a friend who needs to be talked, encouraged, and given suggestions on how they can deal with their situation? Every home doesn't have parents who are particularly loving or who want to be there either. So, or who in many homes, the parents are as anxious as the kids are, and it makes it very difficult for everybody then. So just thinking about what would Jesus, if Jesus sitting in the room, that might be a thought too. If Jesus sitting in the room with your family at the dinner table or watching the movie or whatever, not that he's going to judge, but what would he be saying? What would he be laughing about? I mean, make him, he is still God, but he came to earth to be man, to be human, so we can see the deity is in human form. So just some things like that. It's important. It's important to look at everything, and again, as I said before, just to get out of ourselves, do something physical. If we hit all of the areas of mental, some people don't like to read, but maybe read something or write something. So we have the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, all of those parts of us. If we focus on those a little bit, if the parents say to the teen, okay, so what did you do that was physical today? And walking your dirty dishes to the sink is not counted as physical. But if everybody, maybe that's part of the schedule, everybody marks off when they've done something physical, and maybe it's go outside and walk around, walk the dog, take a bike ride, whatever it is. But have you done something physical? Have you done something to improve your mental, your emotional, your spiritual, your relational? And relational is important as well.
Yeah. I think you're highlighting something that's been really huge for me as we think about how all of our lives has changed. So I don't want to minimize the amount of hurt and pain and loss that this is causing some people, and how much it probably may even will cause more. We haven't even touched on what do you do when your family member's sick, and we probably won't even get to that today. So there's issues that we're not even tackling. But I think one of the things that I think you're mentioning that I don't want to lose sight of, and wouldn't want our teens or parents, is the incredible opportunity we have as Christians. And that's going to look different for somebody. So for me as a youth pastor, for the first time in my life, I get to pick my schedule. And I am not beholden to the expectations of even my own previous expectations of what I did last year as a youth pastor. But for the most part now, teenagers have maybe more free time than they've ever had. And so the ability to spend it in prayer or scripture or reaching out to people in love, they have more time to draw closer to God than ever before, and to do some of those healthy things you were talking about. So for a teenager who has a part-time job and is in school 40 hours a week, exercise and mental health, maybe not even on the radar, but now they have a chance to kind of look at some of those things. And so there is an awesome opportunity there. Well, let me ask you this. So transition now to being a parent of small kids, and we have some people in that. What should I share with my kids? And then at the same time, what should I not share with them about this whole thing? And then to what extent, so this is particular, I guess, let me ask those first. So how much should I share with them about what's going on in the world around, and how much should I not share?
I think it depends on the age of the child, but
Sure.
remember that children under the age of maybe 11 think everything, they perceive everything very concretely. So they're not going to get the abstract understanding of that this is all over the world, that
Yep.
they don't even understand what that means. So telling them that they can't go to the grocery store with you because there are people who uh, might have germs, that, making it more about like when you have a cold and you're sneezing on everybody, we tell you cover your mouth. It's just that there are a lot of people that have colds right now, and so we're trying to stay away from them. I keep it as simple as possible based on their experience.
Sure.
They
And I,
don't need to know about the people who have died or hospitalized, or they don't need to know that, I
yeah.
don't think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, my kids so far have not really shown any signs of being stressed by it all. Like we've talked about it. I think, as I've mentioned, or you just mentioned, I haven't necessarily said, oh, so many people died, but even our senior pastor at Grace Point got COVID-19. And I did
Mm-hmm.
tell them that, hey, Pastor Brady's sick, but the doctors expect him to make a full recovery. I didn't give them maybe and I've just kind of communicated the good things. Like he's out of the woods now, it seems like, and we've met with him over. So he's doing fine. It looks like he's going to make a full recovery. They always expected that. But I guess, my kids aren't showing too much signs of stress. Is that a good indication at 8 and 5 of what's really there? Or do I need to be concerned about things underneath the surface?
No, they will respond to your stress. So if you and your wife are highly agitated and anxious, that's what they will respond to. They won't necessarily connect it to whatever this COVID-19 thing is, or parents are
Sure.
talking about. They might, but they'll just know that they don't feel safe. That's when it's a concern. As long as they feel safe in your expression of your own personal angst is kept between the two of you and not on them, they're probably not sitting there hiding some fear and not telling you about it.
Sure.
If their behaviors change, then that's a different story. If they're suddenly really angry all the time, okay, then there's something bothering them, because they will hear things. It can be as simple as with a 5-year-old. If you tell him that when you get home from work, that after dinner you're going to go to the store with him, and then things happen. This is when we're not in this setting, but things happen and you can't do it, and you say, oh, we're not going to go. In his mind, you lied to him. It's black and white.
Sure.
So even though he doesn't see you as a liar, in that moment, that's what he thinks. So everything is in that black and white. So whatever, if he heard something, if one of you expressed something, and that doesn't mean you have to watch your tongue all the time. You can't do that in this setting when everybody's all together. But if they start acting differently, either withdrawn, aggressive, really hungry, they don't want to eat, just things that are different for their typical behavior, and they're not catching another cold or something else,
Sure.
then I would not worry about it. As a parent, we're always praying that our children will not be negatively affected by whatever is going on around them, asking God to put them in a bubble and protect them throughout their child from whatever we're dealing with or whatever's going on. That is, and God does it in ways that we can't imagine.
Sure. So to summarize, maybe if I'm a parent, well, I guess I am a parent. So for our parents out there, step 1, don't freak out yourself.
Right.
Number 2, be consistent with your kids in what you say and do. And number 3, just pay attention to them and look for any signs that they're struggling.
Yes.
And I think it'll probably be more with our teens who maybe get a larger sense of the world and what's going on.
Right.
And so I guess the last, I got one other question, 2 other questions. So one question would be, for our parents, going back to teens, one of the things parents have expressed to me, one of the biggest difficulties is, how do I get it? They're asking me, how do I get it through my teen's head that they can't go and hang out with their friends? So parents are dealing with it like, okay, they're trying to keep their kids socially distant, but their teen wants to go out and hang out with friends and do this and that. And it's party time. It's summer break for them, essentially, with a little bit of e-learning. So how does a parent do that when not everyone else's parent is going to be doing that? So I know the struggle for some of my parents is I'm telling my kid to keep socially distant, and then their kid is missing the party. So what advice would you have for parents or teens or families that are in that situation?
That's really very understandable. But the parent has to remember that their ultimate job is to keep their children safe and secure. Um, I always say a parent's job is to set boundaries. It's a child's job to push them. So, of course, they're not going to like that. They're going to feel different, but the parent not getting angry with them because they don't get it. Their brains haven't developed enough to really understand either. They're focused on they don't want to be different than all of their friends are and so on. But the parent's job is to keep them safe. So for the parent to say, this is a non-negotiable. I'm sorry. I know right now it feels awful and you may not like it for the next 10 years, but the bottom line is we are not doing this. The parent sets that boundary and holds it. That's what God's entrusted them to do. Doesn't mean that they have to be rigid, but they need to keep their kids safe and recognize how many times do we as adults rebel against what's to keep us safe? How many of us speed when there are laws to keep us safe and we get angry with the policeman who comes and gives us a ticket? That's no different than with the teen. They don't want to be forced to have to do that either, but that's, you have to do it. That's your job.
Sure.
To follow the guidelines from the government, which says at this point in this state is don't go. And there are, the president had said 10 people max, but we've even been said, don't go hang out with people, stay with your immediate family. Don't even go hang out with your cousins. Keep it all contained. So if that's the guideline, then that's what we need to do, whether we agree or not.
Yeah. So last question I have for you is one of the things that I deal with families and teens is there's often a question about, so this is much more general than what we've been talking about, is when is the right time to consider going to counseling? So what I face as a pastor is people will come to me for pastoral counseling, which is more just like, hey, tell me what's going on. Let me pray for you and maybe give you some general advice. But if it's real serious, I just usually recommend a counselor because of the nature of, them needing a certain amount of time. But one of the things I notice is that usually by the time something comes to me, not usually, but there are times when I think families often want to know, like, how soon should we go? Because sometimes if you wait too long, then it's like, oh man, we've got to deal with these 15 issues that used to be just 2 issues. And so for families and even for teens who, they're going through this time of, okay, I'm really depressed, I'm sad that everything's been canceled. What's the line between, sadness and depression or general stress versus anxiety? When's the line when somebody should consider, contacting you or somebody at Cornerstone Vision or somebody else? I would always recommend for our teens and our families to choose a Christian counselor. Not that secular counselors can't do a lot of good, but I would always just want to go to counseling with someone who shares my faith. Because I just think that's such an incredible tool to rely upon God. But tell me, when should somebody consider going to counseling, whether it's a family or a teen who's struggling with issues?
Well, if it's a teen or an adult, if one is incredibly sad all the time, don't worry about whether it's depression, because it doesn't really make any difference. There's clinical depression, which means that's something that is diagnosed and it's an ongoing condition that a person may have a tendency for. But then there's situational depression, which is, and there's a lot of that going on right now, situational depression, and that can happen if adolescent, 13 or 8th grader or something, and kids can be so cruel, but they become sad all the time because they don't feel like they fit in, for example. Mm-hmm. If somebody is really sad and really stressed, don't worry about whether it's anxiety or not anxiety. If life isn't working, I mean, that's what our job as a therapist is, to help people when life isn't working, help them figure out how to help it be successful. I mean, and that comes in all kinds of forms. So I have teens who want to come in to see me. Some, not necessarily the very first time, but you
Sure.
know, the parents will bring them in and say, he just doesn't talk to us anymore. And sometimes it's just a matter of some parenting tweaks, things the parents could do differently, or the teen can do differently, just some little thing. Sometimes it's a bigger thing that the teen doesn't feel like he or she can talk. They become afraid, and we've all done this, that how our parents are going to react to something that we think. And so if it's worth going. Counseling can be 4 or 6 sessions. It doesn't have to be lifelong. It's just taking a situation. If there's a situation that isn't working, then reach out to a counselor. If you only go one time and 2 times or whatever, okay. But it's not a punishment. It's life isn't working for some reason, and we just need some help to do that. That can be with individuals, and most teens aren't going to want to, because there's nothing wrong with me, kind of a thing. But if they are so different, like a couple brought their daughter in and said, we used to have so much fun, but now she doesn't even talk to us. Well, some of that could be she's a teenager wanting to do her own thing, but there could be something a little bit deeper. And she now wants to see me. I've seen her maybe 4 or 5 times, and she likes to come back because we're able to work through some things that she has. There are some tendencies for depression in her family, so she needs it maybe a little more than somebody not. But anyway, and it's the same with the family. When things aren't working, go talk to somebody. Don't if life is not successful, then you need to see somebody. Yeah. And the part about the Christian counselor, first and foremost, I'm a counselor. I was trained to do therapy and help people through situations. But the bottom base of my life is that I'm a Christian. So it doesn't make any difference what I'm doing. I'm going to do it from that extent. Now, there may be people who come in who are not Christians and don't really want that part in their counseling, and we don't force that, certainly. But that's who I am. That's how I live my life. So, and that's who I would want to work with me if I have an issue. That's who I would want my family to work with, is somebody, like you said, who has the same faith base. Doesn't mean that the other person can't do it, but there's another aspect to it.
Yeah. And would you agree with this? So one of the things I've seen in youth ministry is, and I guess my wife, this may be tinted by my wife's experience counseling teenagers, is that there are times when a parent brings their family or their kid in and says, okay, my kid is, they're doing X that I don't like. Okay, I'll use this example. My kid is doing drugs. So get my kid off drugs. So what I tend to find, as soon as the behavior problem is corrected because of either insurance or money, the parent will take the kid out of counseling, and then the issues actually just go dormant for 6 months, and they come back again. They say, well, I'm not going to counseling because that didn't work. Would you agree that it's good to stay the process and kind of really value the counselor and your teen's recommendation? I see actually more often than not, the teen wants to keep going, but the parent says, nope, we're good. The behavior issue is stopped, so let's stop paying for this.
Absolutely. Because many times the issue is as much about the teens and the parents understanding how to communicate, and that they do love each other. They just don't know how to talk and how to give one another grace, and how to, parents don't, we think as parents that we remember exactly what it was like to be a teen, and we don't have a clue. We've forgotten everything that we knew about that. So it is important to stay the course, and for parents not just to drop off their kid and say, fix the kid. It's okay, our family, something isn't working right here. We've got this kid who is separated out. Maybe it's just something about the kid, but there's always a family dynamic, always.
Yep. Awesome. Well, hey, Bonnie, I want to wrap things up. How can me and anybody who watches this video, I think I originally told Bonnie, hey, I usually make these videos about 7 to 10 minutes. And so now I've taken a good hour of your time. You are just entirely too much fun. So You are fun to talk to. Me and Bonnie have been to several. Jamie's a coworker. She has beat me at euchre multiple times. So she's lucky I'm still talking to her at all. So most of you teens don't know what it's like to beat me at euchre. So if you want to just talk to somebody about what that's about, you can talk to Bonnie. So Bonnie, how can we be praying for you, Cornerstone Vision, and just counselors in general during this time? Because I don't know if this causes economic issues for you guys, or if it's the pain that you're seeing your people go through. How can we be praying for you?
Well, thank you for asking that. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this as well. I had no idea that we would, but I just enjoy, I love seeing life better for people. And so if this can do that, then I'm all for it. But it's fun to talk with you. That was a good thing. As for us, as for me and my colleagues, probably the biggest thing right now is for us to remember that what we do is essential and that people need what we do. If they are clients, that they need us as well, and not just assume that okay, I'm not as important. I need to back off. We need to be doing what we're doing for the mental health of our clients and emotional health as well, which is the whole bigger picture. So that's a huge prayer, is for wisdom and discernment to remember what God's called us to do and be there to do that. And then also, again, the same wisdom and discernment about whether we are all here incorporating telehealth as much as we can and working to do that so that we could, like you and I are doing in this interview, we could actually do it online as much as possible. But there are some people that don't have that access, that don't have any internet that we could talk to. And so how can we best serve them and help people through this time? Also so the wisdom and discernment, both of who we are and who God's placed us here to be and do, and then how to best do that to help all of our clients feel safe and secure as much as possible. And then also that we will step back and remember that God has got it. He's in control. We're only in charge of what he's given us to do. And so we need to also do the things that we're telling our clients, like stepping back, having grace, doing something totally unrelated to COVID-19. Just those are the self-care for us, and wisdom and discernment.
Absolutely.
And
well, hey, Bonnie, I have super enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Sounds great. Okay, bye-bye.